This is the Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast, and I am your host, Maureen Broadbeck.
Raw, unprocessed.
In each episode, we explore the mechanisms of identity, vulnerability, authenticity, empowerment, and social change through conversations with inspiring women who are making history and challenging the status quo in both the art world and in society.
Radical, rebel, progressive.
We talk about their real-life challenges and celebrate cis and transgender women so that you can be inspired, empowered, take action, and further your critical understanding about what it means to be a woman in the arts.
Woman, feminism. A revolutionary catalyzing reformation. Radical.
Today I am welcoming Aldeide Delgado. She is a Cuban-born, Miami-based independent Latinx curator and founder and director of the Women Photographers International Archive, WOPHA. The organization researches, promotes, and educates about the role of women and those who identified as women in the field of photography. Aldeide was recently awarded a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation to produce the 2021 WOPHA Congress at Paris Art Museum Miami, PAM. She is the author of the online archive catalog of Cuban women photographers, as well as the namesake ongoing book. Her interests include gender and feminism, radical identity, photography and abstraction in visual arts. She writes for Artichoke, Terremoto, Art Nexus, and CNA America Latina. Aldeide studied art history at the University of Havana, specializing in the history of Cuban photography, and continued her education as fellow of the School of Art Criticism in 2018, a program of the INBA Si Quiero project from the support of the Jumex Foundation and Patronato de Arte Contemporáneo Mexico. She was the 2017 recipient of the Research and Production of Critic Essay Fellowship issued by the Tor Etica for her project Solid Abstraction, Political Path in Central American and the Caribbean. Please welcome Aldeide Delgado. Hi Aldeide, welcome to the show.
Hi Maureen, thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I was wondering if you can start by telling us your background and what got you into art and especially photography.
Well, I am an art historian. I studied art history at the University of Havana. And at that moment, we are speaking around 2013. And from that period, from 2011 to 2016 specifically, when I was studying art history, in the Cuban context, there was lack of research about contemporary Cuban photography. Indeed, we didn't have photography include as the curriculum in art history, of the art history curriculum. And when I started to do my research, I found that most of the bibliography was from the 70s and from the 80s. So it was an evident need to update the process of studying and teaching about photography from contemporary perspectives. And on the other hand, I remember that in one of the class that we had, there was a professor speaking about Cuban art, and she mentioned that it's not until the 90s when we can see in Cuban art an increased amount of women in the classrooms. And I was curious about that, about that expression. And I said, where have been the women in this history? And they mentioned, before the 90s, we don't have a lot of women. I said, this is not possible. And even with my personal interest in photography, I mean, that I have like a personal history that I can share with you. But in this sense, I mean, my grandmother, she hated to people take photograph of her. So for me, that was also very curious because in my family, all the women have passed away like very early in their 60s. So I don't have, for example, photography reference of my grandmother because she doesn't like people to take photograph of her. And that took me to trying to understand what has been the relationship of photography with race. I mean, my grandmother, she was a Black woman that didn't like people to take photograph of her. All of that elements want me to inform my approach to photography and my interest to study more about the genre. And at the specific time, if we think about the importance that photography had in the Cuban context for expanding the propagandistic ideas
Yeah.
of the dictatorship since it came, yeah, I thought that it was needed because, when again, if we go to the history of Cuban photography, you have all of these photographers, primarily male photographers during
Yeah.
the 60s and 80s, that reinforce this idea of the male hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was in that context creating a project that centered the production of women was a radical act.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that was like the first elements that all of these problematics that made me think about photography, that made me think about the contribution of women in that history. And for that reason, my first project was to create a catalog of Cuban women photographers from the 19th century through the present. That's how everything started.
This is fascinating. I'm guessing it was a huge research and you had to go back and research and find things, and it was a bit of an investigation work. What did you find out? Because you were told that women were basically non-existent. What was the reality?
Exactly. So when I started to do this research, I found that in these main books or main articles that refer about Cuban photography, I found mostly like five artists mentioned, five or two artists mentioned. And yes, I face a lot that confrontation or that kind of expressions in which someone told me, oh, there is no Cuban women artists in photography. And if they are not good. So that was, that that process that came with me in which I was like, okay, I am going to the archives. And it was like a very detailed project because there was none research about that before. So I had to go to the libraries. I had to go specifically to the newspapers, to the magazines from 19th century through the first part of the 20th century, trying to look in the credits of the photograph, what are the names of those women photographers. And yes, if at the beginning there were only like 2 to 5 Cuban women photographers recognized, right now I have in the catalog, specifically from that period, around 58 Cuban women photographers. So it was one of the most exciting moments for me
Beautiful.
was when I found that in the catalogs of the Cuban Photography Club a female division. That's how they call themselves. That was the feminine division of the Cuban Photography
Yeah,
Club.
yeah.
This institution was the most important institution dedicated to photographic arts during the Republican period that spanned from 1902 to 1959. And the Cuban Photography Club was dedicated to promoting the love of photography as an artistic practice. And then there were some previous research about this institution. And in none of this previous research, that feminine division was previously recognized. So for me, it was one of the great moments when looking to the catalogs of the competitions that this institution organized, I found this feminine division that the main goal was gated together, they said, as a lawful purpose of life, in which they created their own competitions. They creating a platform for making visible the work of the women in the club.
Yeah.
And also, they were claiming the right to the social life because we need to understand that in Cuba, there is not until the 1940 that the Constitution allow women to have the gains of their work without the authorization of their husband.
Wow. It's not that long ago, huh?
Yes.
How long did it took you to work on this project and come up with those 58 artists?
I mean, I am still working on that project. Something that is very important
Yeah.
is that when you do this kind of research, it's not one time event. It's not, it requires a lot of time.
Yeah.
Even and specifically in my case right now, it's because I am not living in Cuba. Also, you have like these problematics in which the archives are not open to the public. So you have to come through a very hard process in which you need to get a lot of authorization letter, permission letters to go to these archives and trying to make research. That has been one of the main challenge with this research that so far I think that has like 8 years of work. If I started to work on this project in 2013, one of the first thing is that I had the challenge of being able to access to the archives, also archives in which the information is not classified. So you have this amount of books that is like an unfinished work in which you need to review all of these publications. And then the other part is trying to locate the families of those photographers.
Yeah.
What I am finding is like the testimony of their existence, the testimony of their presence through the information that is available on those magazines. But then I'm trying to track the history of who was the family, where they were living, and what are the legacies of how I can get in contact with some familia that is able to show some of the work that these artists could have made. And in that sense, this is a career against the clock, because what I have found is that in some cases the families destroy the work.
Wow.
Because they don't consider, when the artist passed away, they threw away everything. And sometimes they only keep the family photographs because they don't consider that what their grandmother or auntie was creating or was doing was artistic or has any value. So that's one of the main challenges that I have faced during all this process. And other people that have the information, but they also want to sell it, or there are like other kind of dynamics that you face when you are in this process.
Interesting.
I was super sad or frustrated when a person wrote me saying that that person found a box of photographs from one of the artists. Her name is Lotegram, and she was an artist from Germany. She established in Cuba during the 30s and 40s, and she was a crucial figure in the Lyceum of Havana, that was an institution, a cultural institution in the island during those years, created by women. She was very important in the Cuban Photography Club as well. She won even some prizes and worked for the social magazine that as well. It was one of the crucial magazines during the period. And that person came, wrote to me and said, I have this box of photographs by Lotte Graham. And it was like, that's amazing. Please send me some examples or send me something to have reference. So I have been researching about this work a lot. Even that person contacted me because I was the only reference online about the work of this artist. And well, he just wanted to sell it and he didn't send me anything. So that was one of that process. I don't have all of this work have been like very personal. I don't have the funds to say, okay, I will buy an archive of the work, and then I didn't receive any more notifications. So that has been like very sad, and it's one of the main problematics that this kind of research face.
Wow. So in 2016 you moved to Miami, and then in 2018 you decided to found the Women Photographers International Archive, called WOPHA. And your mission is to highlight the contribution of women photographers to modern and contemporary art in order to rewrite the artistic canon and provoke social change. Can you talk about this project and how you decided to start it?
Yeah, so specifically, when I was living in Cuba, the project catalog of Cuban women photographers was focused mainly on Cuban women artists working in the island, because I had the limitations of access to internet. I, of course, didn't have like the resources to get in contact with the artists living outside the country. When I migrated to Florida, to Miami, my first work was getting in touch with the photographers. And I found that there were a lot of artists living everywhere in the world. And at the same time, I started in that process that all the migrants person experience, in which you don't feel anymore that you are 100% Cuban, but at the same time, I am not 100% US American.
Yep.
So I decide Yeah, I decide for me was, and in that process, you also need to find a political voice. You found yourself in a place in which you are no longer Cuban or 100% Cuban, but you are also from the Caribbean, you are also from Latin America, and you start to embrace all of these identities that conform yourself
Yeah.
when you are in the diaspora, when you are in this diasporic place, if we can say it in that way. So for me, it was crucial to embrace, to locate myself in a border context.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that I have been speaking a lot, and that intersects my whole practice. Is how I situate myself in a border context that in the crossroads of the Americas. That is what made me think in WOPHA, in Women Photographers International Archive, as an organization with an international focus, but that focus emerged from the border,
Yeah.
thinking on the theorizations of the Chicana feminist author Gloria Anzaldúa, in which she speaks about the border as this political place, cultural place, in which people from different ethnicities are working side by side, and where a new consciousness, she called it like the mestiza consciousness, emerged.
Interesting.
That for me have been crucial. And from that perspective, WOFA assumes this international character, but with a specific focus on the artistic production from Latin American, the Caribbean, and Latinx communities. Because if we think in how the history of photography has been written, all of this, well, there are still a lot of work that needs to be done when we consider the artistic production from this part of the world. That's one of the goals that I have with the organization, that is creating this archive of international reference when people can go and learn about the work of women photographers, but also an archive that is specialized in researching and promoting the work of women photographers from the Caribbean, Latin America, and Latinx communities.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, because with this project, you are really redefining art history and the history of photography, and it changes everything, I think, from what we know and what we've been told and how we have learned the history of photography. It's so important that this is taking place. Last November, from the 17th to the 20th, you created an event, which is the first Congress, Women, Photography and Feminism, where you united important, prominent women photographers and curators and art historians from all over the world, and this took place at the Paris Art Museum in Miami. According to your website, this event presented seminal and emerging research and discourse in the field, considering both national and international discussion about women and feminism in history of photography. So why this event? How did it started? And what happened there?
Yes, well, right away after I created WOFA, as I said, I founded the organization in 2018. I found that I wasn't alone in that endeavor.
Yeah.
I started to see a lot of other organizations, a lot of other women that we were doing similar work. We were creating our own platforms. We were creating projects. We were making books, and we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
So for me, the first question was, how is that I found approximately 98 women photography collectives and organizations, and we didn't know each other? I
Yeah.
mean, we are working very independently. And one of my focus on my ideas with the Congress was around this notion of photography as a collaborative practice, and also thinking about what the feminist photographic art can be. And in that sense, the notions of collaboration, the notions of collectivity, the notions of sisterhood were crucial for
Yeah.
the understanding of this event. So the first elements about the Congress was the production of this photo book, that the
Yes.
name is Becoming Sisters,
Yes.
Women Photography Collectives and Organizations. This photo book works as a registry and collective manifesto of the work of 40 women photography collectives and organizations working
Yeah,
today.
yeah. I will put the link.
Thank you. Some important element to notice is that the Congress was totally free, and we are an emerging nonprofit organization, and all the proceeds of the sale of the book will directly impact the production of the programming of WOPHA in 2022.
Yeah,
The process of reach all of these organizations and then making them aware or making them understand what we were doing was like a very rewarding process because it was about creating those conversations. I mean, I approached to these organizations, I asked them one question, three questions particularly. One of them was why they created their organization, where they were based, what is the work that they do, and what is the importance of feminism or collaboration for their practice. And then I asked them to nominate from 1 to 5 artists to include in the book.
yeah.
So it's very something beautiful that happened in this publication
Nice.
is how in that response about feminism they also mention some of the main reference for them. And it's curious because in some of the reference, they mention some of the artists that also were included in the book. So then a thread is generated
Yeah, nice.
that link us all. So this book is a place, it works as a photo book, but as a directory in the sense of
Yeah,
when people ask me right now, what is the state for women in photography? Or you have women artists that ask where I can go to show my work. So the answer is here.
yeah,
So that was one of the main ideas with the Congress was creating this gathering of all these organizations, creating a platform in which we can all get together. My idea, my vision is to continue having these meetings with all the organizations annually. For that reason, I launched a WOPHA membership program in which it's about creating a coalition and trying to work together, trying to establish strategies together because at the end we have the same goal.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that if we are united, we will be stronger. So that's the main ideas with this publication. Then the second part of the Congress was how important it was to create theoretical context for all the works that we as organizations are doing.
yeah,
I mean, as I just said, asking about what is the state of the field of women in
yeah,
photography today, I consider that we needed to have this kind of discussions, starting with the language. I mean, in all our organizations, we speak about women photography, but then we said that we approach to the work of women, non-binary subjects, trans subjects, queer people. So in a certain way, it's like the category of women is not enough anymore. In this notion around this importance of creating or researching about the non-patriarchal photography. So what is still the category women like the most effective category from where assume or practice? So that was to what kind of women we are referring to.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that it was very important to have like those nuance and to bring that into discussion. I said through WOFA how we embrace the category of women as everyone who identifies
yeah,
as a woman, and also how I am very influenced by the notion of women by bell hooks, in which she said that everyone that in society has experienced like this process of discrimination that are associated with the feminine can be socially configured as women. It's something like that. So I am more interested on that perspective. If we think that the gender is performative, if we go with Judith Butler, then what can we learn from who is behind the camera?
yeah,
I think it's the gender or the skin color of who is behind the camera what matters, or are the ideologies or the constructions, the cultural construction that a person have, which define that notion of what feminine photography can be.
yeah,
I wanted that theoretical context in which we can discuss about what does it mean to work focused on women, what does it mean to work focused on photography, and what does it mean to assume a feminist perspective in your work. And that's something that is built through the several panels. Everything is available online now, so people can watch all the conversations
Oh,
from the
excellent.
YouTube.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Cool.
from the
Cool.
YouTube channels of PAM and WOPHA. And then the first part of the presentation of the Congress was about what a feminist photograph can be. And in that session, we have discussions from Abigail Solomon Goudot, Rosanna Marcosci, Elizabeth Ferrer with a presentation about Latinx women photographers, Claire Raymond. We also had a conversation that the title was Can Men Create Feminist Photography? And all the time, I was very interested in having, this critical character,
Yeah. Yeah.
this space for problematization. And then another of the main topics, again, was around this idea of sisterhood.
Yeah.
And I focus in practices in photography in which women are the authors, the subjects, but also the receptors
Yeah.
of the work.
Yeah.
So that's why I mentioned we have this panel focused on El Picnic, that was a photo performance by artists Nereida Garcia Ferraz, Eugenia Vargas Pereira, and Laura Gonzalez Flores, and artwork from 1989, that is the cover of the photo that we produced. Then I had another panel because I think we were speaking about how photography has these several words. I mean, sometimes you are in this position in which people establish several categorizations in the sense of photography as an artistic practice, as a
Yeah.
fine arts.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that say I'm a documentary photographer and not necessarily an artist. So there are some of the problems. There was a topic underlying all the discussion that I think that was important to address, that was about who has the right to document which community. So for that reason, I conceptualized the panel on documentary photography and the power of imagination, a panel that was moderated by Whitney Johnson, the director of immersive experiences at National Geographic. I intentionally choose Whitney to moderate this panel because I wanted to have all these 5 artists: Veronica Sanchez Boncomo from Venezuela, Vanessa Charlotte from Haiti, Daniela Salkman from Vietnam, Maggie Stever, who is, all of them are very well known photographers. Maggie Stever also that from here, from the US, and Leila Amatullah, who also has some reference to Senegal in her ancestry. So I wanted to have all these women that have worked at some point for National Geographic in discussion about what have changed or not in the field of documentary photography.
Yeah.
And in that sense, also speak a little bit about, after all the protests, all that happened in the US last year, to speak a little bit about how important is the notion of imagination in that regards, or a little bit also to discuss about the notions of authenticity, about the
Yeah.
ethics
Yeah.
in photography. So
Yeah.
that was, we went, I mean, all of these topics can work as independent Congress itself.
Yeah.
And we're doing the first one.
That's true.
And yeah, and we were doing
Wow.
the first one, so it was there is a lot of to unpack, and that's what we are going to do in the coming years until the next edition in 2024. Another of the important topics of the Congress center on the idea of the archives
Yeah.
and how to decolonize the archive. We have another panel that was about curatorial practices. And yes, and parallelly to all of this that was happening during 2 days, in the short time, the
Wow.
limited time of 2 days, we also opened 4 exhibitions in Miami, and we launched an artist in resident program. So that's everything that happened with the Congress. And
Wow.
as I said, the good news is that everything is available online. We have created this notion or this program, Expanded Congress, in which online, gradually, we will continue uploading information and the conversations will keep going
Yeah.
on some of the topics that were discussed.
This is amazing. And what I really like about this whole idea and what you did is that you are creating or gathering all these different collectives and people and organization and artists and creators and art historian, and it creates a real parallel society that touches the actual one, but it creates something really completely new. And the fact that you can gather people like that, it makes it so much stronger, and it's gonna grow, and this is gonna bring real balance to the way the society is right now. And I'm not sure what we can expect as counter reaction, but there's going to be some counter reaction, I'm guessing, because every time you challenge things and change things, there is reticence and there's people not welcoming the change. This is going to be really, really interesting. In a couple words, could you assess, in a way, this first edition? Is there one main idea that comes out of it? Or new directions that maybe came that you were not really thinking about before, and after the Congress, it kind of emerged?
When I can say that the event was very plural. And I think that response to my own, I don't want it like a single idea. I thought like in constellations. I thought on this notion that I have been working a lot about archipelagos. So I think every panel had like their own big topic of discussion that was very hard to develop in 1 hour. So I think that in the sense of the results, some of the time, and this is something that even I want to work more for the coming edition, that is the opportunity to have like the workshops and opportunities to have the topics and then more time for the discussions of those topics. Because, for example, the panel on curatorial practice, it had like this strong focus on not necessarily prioritizing the object. I mean, the main element that was questioned in that panel is how, when we want to curate the work of women photographers, when we want to curate or do exhibitions about photography in general, we focus on the object, on the photograph. And what was being reclaimed, what was claimed from the Congress was the important to put the focus on the process and in the interactions, the social relations that occur within the photographic act. So I think that's very important. The ongoing question there would be, what are the dispositives, in the sense of what are the curatorial dispositives that we have to implement then to focus on that process? How do we do that?
Interesting, yeah.
It's like how we, in a certain way, dematerialize the photograph. So I was very curious to see how in some cases curators are not including what we may consider as art in curatorial show, in an exhibition, or how we are also including, again, other documents that come from newspapers or that come from, maybe, I don't know, like posters, or how other elements came to contextualize the work that is being presented. So that's, I think, one of the discussions in which I consider, an idea that I think that is very important, specifically considering my role as an art historian, as a writer, but as a curator as well. Another of the moments that was very important was the presentation of the book, A World History of Women Photographers, by Luz Levar and Mary Robert, a panel moderated by Iliana Selejan. In that panel, they were speaking about all what took to create a book in which 300 women photographers were included and 160 authors from around the world contributed, myself included. So what is interesting to me about that conversation was this idea of decentralizing the notion of authorship and the own way in which we have been creating events. Because for me, one of the questions that I had for the World Congress was, we have been working about women photographers, but our focus have been in the single author. I mean, we have been using like the same patriarchal
Yeah,
methods that
yeah,
we have been taught.
absolutely. Yeah.
So how we change that?
This is huge. Yeah,
Yeah, and for that reason, my focus on the collectives and the collaborative
yeah.
practices as a counter narrative to that discussion.
This is big time huge. Yeah, for sure. For sure. This is super interesting. And on the website of the MOFA, there's the Fast Forward Manifesto, a manifesto for increased involvement of women in photography. And so far, there is 984 people that have signed it. I mean galleries, universities, festivals, magazine, and artists. And I saw there's Martin Parr that signed it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is cool. Can you talk about the idea behind this? And, I also want to make sure people know that it's available online to be signed.
Yes. So again, we want to provoke action. And I think that the manifesto is a very powerful way to provoke that action. And I think that what Fast Forward is proposing, they created this manifesto and they are encouraging us to sign. That is to encourage institutions, curators to collect, promote, include women artists in the
Yep.
programs at least to a 50%. It's very powerful because it gives us the opportunity that the people that signs this document can take real action,
Yep.
can affect from their own institutions, from their practice, they can consciously affect those changes that we are claiming. The manifesto is an ongoing project and that they are, in this case, Fast Forward, they are working very hard through establishing partnerships with other institutions, with
Yep.
other organizations to make all the claims that they are written effective.
Yep.
I think something that the Congress looked forward was that how we can go beyond the work of making visible women's photographers' practices.
Yep.
I think we have speaking a lot and we are doing the work of visibilization, of making or render visible those work, but also we need to think on what is the next step,
Yeah.
how we can strengthen our visions, our missions, what we are doing. And in that sense, I think the manifesto is crucial.
Yeah, it gives also pillars and
Exactly.
foundation to build upon and to use and to actually take a step, one
It
more step.
offers, as I said, it offers guidance
Yeah.
because it puts a position, it establishes a goal to which we are all addressing. I mean, this is the goal that we want to achieve. And that's what we are working.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks so much. This has been really, really an interesting conversation. Is there anything else you would like to add or talk about that we haven't talked about?
Well, I just going to mention like some of the upcoming projects in which WOPHA is
Yes.
working. As I said, the next edition of the WOPHA Congress will take place in 2024. I am already like getting prepared for that process. We have 3 years in advance, but everyone that is listening to this podcast and has any idea or wants to collaborate or be involved in some way, please reach at info@wopha.org. That is like info@wopha.org because I'm very open, I am very reachable, I am in social media.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to contribute to the conversation, please do that. This is like the perfect time because it's where I'm thinking and defining how the upcoming edition will work. For the next year, we are continuing with our artist in resident program that consists in which an artist that wants to come to Miami to do a specific project in the city, we host them for 1 week and then we organize an exhibition that in this case will take place with the exhibition will be of the artist Nadia Huggins. It's an artist from San Vicente and the Grenadines. And then we will open an exhibition in September of her work. And next year I will be working on a new project about women photographers from Dominican Republic. And this is the first project that will address this topic on the context of the island. So again, it refers to the lack of research and the amount of work that is the fertile ground for doing research and ongoing work that still are when we approach to the artistic productions from the Caribbean and Latin America.
Fabulous.
Thank you. And finally encourage everyone to buy the book, the photo book that we have produced, because it is very important to continue supporting our mission of promoting and researching about the work of women artists in photography.
Really cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This podcast is supported by Pro Helvetia, the Swiss Arts Council, the Republic and Canton of Geneva, and the city of Nancy in Switzerland. We are so thankful for their support and commitment to women, culture, and the arts. Thanks for listening to Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast. Learn more about our featured artists and sign up for news and updates by visiting our website rawradical.com.
Organic, radical, profound.
Please consider leaving us a comment and review on your preferred podcast listening platform to help others discover the show and take part in this global dialogue.
She, intuitive.
I am Maureen Broadbeck,
Fatal.
and until next time, keep the dream alive.
Woman.